they relevant for Indian investors? And I'd also like to pose the question whether in this global world where India is being courted by countries across the globe, whether the UK itself remains relevant for India.
Is the relationship between the UK and India a meaningful one, and can the UK be doing more to develop it? Well, the answer to both of those questions is, of course, yes. I'm a great fan and advocate of closer links between our two great countries. And for CityUK, this is a topic that we are deeply committed to doing more about, to advancing the dialogue. Of course, regulation also changes the game about whether a country is a good place to invest or not. And the UK has had to rethink its approach to regulation. We had a single regulator a few years ago, the Financial Services Authority. We now have the Bank of England more heavily involved, and of course the PRA and the FCA finding their feet and doing well, but with a much harsher, much stricter mandate.
I agree with a huge amount of what Chris has had to say. And I really just wanted to say from the outset that I think CityUK really has been a brilliant representative of the financial and professional services across the whole of the UK over the past few years, and they really do genuinely represent us in a very effective way.
My party has taken the trouble to issue a document entitled Why the Markets Want Stable Coalition Government, and it sets out the danger of either approach and the problems of an unstable political situation. And there is certainly evidence that the bond and currency markets are being very cautious with political risk having been priced in. So the irony of all this is that the parties are making great efforts to distinguish themselves, but we've had a very successful period in government. We've had record employment in particular, and Christine Lagarde of the IMF has endorsed the coalition's economic policies. And I believe there is good news too, despite these expected adverse reactions by the currency and bond markets. I and many other commentators believe that we will continue to compare favourably with continental Europe in terms of investment and growth. I still believe that London would remain a global business centre. Our universities will still remain world class. We'll still be a major hub for the creative and tech industries.
The UK has always had a fascination for Indians, and UK elections have been witnessed more as a predictable game. This election is obviously a little different. To that extent, there might be a greater degree of interest and maybe a little bit of concern. But Manoj was telling me that yesterday Ed Miliband spoke about how India-UK relations will have to be reworked. Now, I've been hearing this term reworking of India-UK relations for a very, very long time, right since the time of Mrs. Thatcher. The point is, India-UK relations are at a very, very stable equilibrium. Overall, it's a relationship which can only get better. That's really, you have to keep oiling the machine. And if the machine is sufficiently oiled, one or two irritants at least people are sensitive to these irritants. Once people are sensitive to irritants, I think they have a tendency to get resolved by themselves. I think overall, I would say that the United Kingdom, the Foreign Office of the United Kingdom, has done a tremendous job in trying to actually sell the UK within India. Whether that has been met with an equal degree of reciprocity is something which I will leave unaddressed for the moment.
I don't know whether you're expressing disappointment or a surprise that the Modi Big Bang in terms of reforms, transformational economics and politics is something that has been missed out.
I think many of us thought that the Modi government would come in with even more energy than it has done in terms of vision. I think underneath the surface, and I think we've had some very interesting discussions over breakfast, that there is a lot happening, but whether that is actually now evident in terms of infrastructure projects and so on, it's certainly the commentary certainly seems to be that we're not there yet.
The realization that the old private-public partnership model, which had actually marked many of the old infrastructure investments in the past, were no longer going to be viable, partly because many of the Indian private sector companies had over-leveraged themselves and were no longer in a position to actually even fulfill some of the earlier commitments.
I was fortunate to be in Mumbai very recently, and the message that I heard very strongly was that this is a government that wants to govern for its full term, not for 5 minutes.
I wanted to touch upon something that Tim said. He said that if there was a Labour government in power, then you would see some capital flight. Is that what you're seeing from City UK's perspective, that that's what will happen?
We do face perhaps the most interesting general election that I can remember in 30 years. We have a resurgence in ideology. We have a leader of the Labour Party who is very much of his political colour. But also we have geography playing a bigger issue now, in the sense that the Scottish Nationalist Party is a resurgent force. It seems to me that when we get into, on the 8th and 9th of May, once we as the electorate have spoken, and I do think that as voters, we will get the government that we deserve. So if you are registered to vote, please do vote, because this is going to be a really, really knife-edge general election.
The infrastructure was opened in India to the private sector with the good reasons. Are we seeing that private sector capability is not meeting up to the expectation? And how is it beyond financial issues, or where is the issue? I mean, how the government of India is going to tackling such a huge infrastructure bottlenecks, where today the whole story of India is not able to make more visible to the external world. So is it just the financial issues, or is it beyond financial issues? Because I see in the past, government has been doing this project, implementation, power, road, and ports. So when we brought this private sector in the last 10 years, so are they not able to deliver it? How this is going to be tackled? I'd be happy to hear this.
There is the private sector and there is the private sector. There are some companies in India which have done phenomenally well, whose capacities to actually take on major projects is probably unrivaled and of global scale. And if you're racing against time, then you do the next best thing, you go in for direct investment. And I think it's not necessarily a commentary on the private sector as a whole, but it's certainly a commentary to anybody who's involved in joint sector projects. Please pick your partner after due diligence.